Okay, so what if I told you that everything, I mean everything, you're seeing, hearing, and feeling right now isn't actually real? Well, not in the way you think it is anyway. We're about to dive into this really wild framework called the Phantasmal Substrate model. And its whole deal is that your reality, it's not the world itself. It's more like a super sophisticated user interface that's actually built to hide the real world from you. It's a pretty jarring question, right? I mean, we instinctively just assume the world we see, touch, and hear is the real deal. But this model, it asks us to entertain a pretty wild possibility. What if our perception is just a convenient, super simplified version of something way, way more complex? And this quote, this really gets right to the heart of it all. The reality we experience is optimized for coherence, not for truth. It's designed to be stable, to make sense, but that doesn't mean it's an accurate picture of what's really out there. You know the perfect analogy? A computer desktop. You click on icons and folders, it's a simple interface that completely hides the billions of ones and zeros that are actually running the machine. So how in the world do we even begin to unpack a concept this big? Well, here's our roadmap. We're going to start by defining reality as an interface. Then we'll look under the hood at its core parts. We'll figure out where you fit into all this, explore some fascinating potential glitches in the system, and then we'll get practical with a user's guide before we wrap up with the profound questions this model leaves us chewing on. All right, let's start with the big foundational idea. The phantasmal substrate model argues that we never experience the world directly, ever. Instead, our minds are always operating through this mediating layer. Think of it like a perceptual filter that takes an impossibly complex reality and translates it into something our brains can actually handle. And this brings us to the interface's main goal. Look, its job isn't to show you the truth in all its raw, messy glory. Its job is usability. It's designed to give you a stable, continuous, and coherent world so you can function. Kind of like a video game, right? It prioritizes a smooth, playable experience over showing you every single line of code that's running in the background. Okay, so if our reality is an interface, what's the engine running things under the hood? Let's break down the core components that, according to this model, make the whole system tick. So the first and biggest concept is something called the phantasmal substrate. This is the model's term for the fundamental layer of reality itself, the ultimate source code, if you will. But imagine it's not just ones and zeros, but a type of information so completely alien that our brains are like structurally incapable of understanding it. We can never ever access it directly. We only see what the interface renders for us. So how does our mind even begin to translate that completely unknowable substrate into something we can wrap our heads around? Well, it happens through a process with a pretty technical name, automatic eidoliation. But, put simply, it's basically your brain's storyteller just working on autopilot. This happens before you're even consciously aware of it. It's constantly turning this raw, chaotic data into symbols, stories, and meaning, all just to keep your experience stable. It's actually the exact same thing that happens when you see faces in clouds. So this whole process is essentially a defense mechanism. The interface is working 24/7 to shield us from the raw, chaotic data of the substrate. It takes that tangled mess of information and translates it into simple, recognizable symbols. It smooths out all the complex knots into linear, understandable stories. And crucially, it puts up a wall, preventing us from ever peeking behind the curtain to see how the machinery actually works. Now, I know this all sounds very abstract, so let's make it personal. If reality is an interface, then what are you? Where does your consciousness, your whole sense of self, fit into this picture? The model's answer is, well, it's pretty humbling. Your awareness isn't some privileged, objective observer looking in from the outside. No, you're a constrained receiver who's already inside the system. You're like a character in a video game. You can only interact with the world through the interface you've been given. You can't just quit to the main menu and see what's really going on. And this just brilliantly illustrates the trap we're in. It's a closed loop. The system feeds you information, you observe it, but, and here's the kicker, the system also defines the tools and the rules you use to observe. So how could you possibly verify if any of it is real? Any test you run, any evidence you gather, it's all still happening within the very interface you're trying to test. It's totally circular. Okay, but if we're in a closed system, is it perfect? Or are there moments when the simulation stutters a bit? This section is all about the super fascinating idea of glitches, those little moments that might just reveal the seams of our reality. So think about those strange experiences like déjà vu or that weird feeling of unreality. We usually just dismiss them as, brain farts, but this model offers a really provocative alternative. What if they're not errors at all? What if they're diagnostic signals? Little artifacts that pop up when the interface is under strain, giving us a rare glimpse of its underlying mechanics. So what would these glitches even look like? Well, the model points to a few possibilities. Maybe it's a perceptual inconsistency, seeing something impossible that just doesn't belong. Or a narrative discontinuity, a moment where reality feels like a film that's just skipped a frame, like déjà vu. It could even be a sudden intense feeling of seeing patterns in random noise, or that classic sense of detachment, where you feel like you're just watching your life instead of actually living it. Now, here's a really crucial clarification. This model is not, I repeat, not suggesting these glitches are messages from some creator or that an agent is sending them to you. No. It treats them simply as mechanical artifacts, like a graphical bug in a video game. It's evidence of a system, not evidence of intent. So, if we accept this as even a remote possibility, how should we live our lives? This isn't about escaping the matrix. It's about learning to be a savvy user of the interface. Our brains are basically meaning-making machines. The model sees this as a core feature of our operating system, something designed to keep us psychologically stable in a pretty chaotic world. But it's a double-edged sword, right? That powerful drive for certainty can cause us to lock on to one explanation, one belief, and that can stop us from seeing other, maybe even more accurate possibilities. So the practical goal here isn't to find the one true meaning or to try and break out of the system. It's to develop what the model calls a defensive orientation. And this is all about achieving psychological freedom and stability within the interface, no matter how weird the underlying reality might actually be. And how do you do that? Well, it comes down to staying mentally flexible. You treat your beliefs as temporary models to be tested, not as absolute truths to be defended at all costs. You have to actively resist getting locked into a single, rigid worldview. When you're facing this level of profound uncertainty, the model argues that your number one priority has to be your own psychological sovereignty. And this might just be the most important rule in the entire model. It's called non-attribution discipline. And what it means is, do not personalize the system. It's a huge cognitive trap to start thinking the universe is sending you signs, or that things are happening for you or to you. The model is very clear. The system is impersonal, it's indifferent. You gotta resist the urge to give it a personality because it just doesn't have one. As we start to wrap this up, it's so important to remember that the Phantasmal Substrate model isn't a doctrine or some new religion. It's a tool for thought. It's a lens to look through. And, like any good model, it leaves us with way more questions than answers. I mean, the model leaves us with some really profound open questions. Is this substrate thing the fundamental bedrock of reality, or is it just another layer in a cosmic nesting doll? Is our consciousness on some fixed path, or can it actually evolve and adapt within the system? We just don't have the answers. And that brings us to the final, really provocative thought. If our reality really is an interface, was it built to help us navigate an otherwise incomprehensible existence? Or was it built to keep us contained? Is it a window, or is it a wall? That's definitely something to think about.